Brothers and sisters, welcome to Prolife Primetime. Pro-Life leader Frank Pavone here, Director of Priests for Life. And today we're going to have a conversation with someone that I was very, very happy to welcome to our Priests for Life headquarters today. He is the Executive Director of the National Right to Life Committee, and his name is Scott Fishbach. Scott, welcome to Priests for Life.
I appreciate it. Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's so good to be with you, and I want to, all of you in our audience, you've heard me speak about National Right to Life, the projects, the activities, the publications, and I want to talk a little bit with Scott now about our long-standing relationship with this organization, make sure that you know how to take advantage of all that is that they do. But Scott, first, a little bit about your own background. So Minnesota is your training ground, I guess, in pro-life movement. You headed up the state Right to Life group. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was the executive director of Minnesota Citizens Concerned for Life for 21 years.
MCCL.
Which is the state affiliate of the National Right to Life Committee. So it's one of the state affiliates. It's got about probably 150 chapters across the state, so we work a lot with the grassroots. We have a presence at the state capitol, but again, we do a lot of education. That's really kind of the cornerstone of Minnesota.
Right.
And to support those pregnancy care centers to offer alternatives.
Right, exactly. So you worked there for the longest time, and then you took over at National Right to Life right at the beginning of 2023.
Right after the Dobbs decision, it was determined that some of the folks had been with us for so many years were going to retire, and they asked if I would come out from Minnesota to our office in Alexandria, and I said yes, and it's been great.
National Right to Life itself, let's talk a little bit about the history there. You have affiliates in all 50 states, and we work with a lot of them, and it's just a fantastic, because not only is there state affiliates, then you've got below that, so to speak, the county Right to Life groups. And you know, when I was first ordained, I was sent to Staten Island. We worked with the Staten Island Right to Life Committee, which was their affiliate of New York State, affiliate of National, right? So that was one of our early connections with NRLC. But tell us more about NRLC.
Well, National Right to Life was started in 1968, so it was one of the first pro-life groups out there. It actually started in Virginia. And it was kind of in anticipation of states pushing to legalize abortion at that time. So there was pushes in the states. So they realized, look, we've got to have a state presence, but we also want to have a federal presence too in case if something happens. And then of course it just really exploded right after Roe versus Wade. All the states needed an affiliate. All of the states needed to fight back. And thus we have the 50 state affiliates. Each one of those state groups then has a member on our board. And then our board has an executive committee of 9 members. So it's really a bottom-up organization. It starts out at the grassroots with those chapters, with those leaders that then have their state groups that then send somebody to the national board. And we've always been laser focused on the issues of abortion, infanticide, and euthanasia.
Those three, right?
Those three.
Yes,
we've really remained laser focused on that. And then working in the areas of education, legislation, and then political action to try to change the law, of course.
You know, over the years, and as I say, I've been interacting with National, I guess I could say since probably 1986, 87. And of course got to know Dr. Wilkie, of course, who was involved in the early years. And I knew Mildred Jefferson, right? She was one of the very first founding...
One of the first presidents actually, of National Right to Life.
Of National Right to Life. So, and you work simultaneously at the federal level and the state level. I know for the states, you have model legislation. You defend existing legislation. Federally, you have model legislation. In fact, I have noticed over the years, working with the members of Congress, that NRLC is one of the most effective and highly respected pro-life lobbying groups that there is, right? I mean, the members of Congress, NRLC speaks, they listen.
They do, yes. And that's really been a testament to the years of expertise that the leaders of NRLC have put in, and the longevity that the organization has had in Washington, D.C. But it goes back to those grassroots. They know that when we're up on Capitol Hill and we're talking to people on Capitol Hill, that we've also got people back in their districts. You know, there's a real group back in their own congressional district that's going to call them, write them, send in the postcards, and they understand that there's going to be a continuity there. There's going to be information shared, there's going to be education shared, there's going to be voting records tracked. All of that stuff is going to be there, and it's been effective. I mean, it got us to the position of course, all of us working together to get rid of Roe versus Wade.
Yes.
And now we're in a position where we can move simultaneously with all elected officials on the federal level, on the state level, sometimes even on the county or local level.
That's right.
To try to restore protection if we can. So it really is a multi-tiered approach. And again, working in those areas of education, legislation, and then political action to do what we can to build that culture and to try to, we can while we try to change the law, we also want to save as many lives as we can along the way.
Interim, yeah.
Through the support networks, through the safety nets, the care centers, all those types of things. So there's so many different facets of the movement, but all of us working together is what's going to have the impact.
Exactly. Well, if you're just joining us, friends, we're talking with Scott Fischbach. He is the Executive Director of National Right to Life. Scott, nrlc.org
Yes,
is the
that
website,
is our website.
right?
Correct.
nrlc.org. Friends, we want to invite you to learn more about this organization as we continue to discuss it. Make that one of your go-to places for information on, as Scott is saying, pro-life education, pro-life legislation, pro-life political action. All of those three arenas, NRLC is at the forefront of this activity for our movement. And I wanted to ask you, Scott, to clarify for our audience, this is a point I've hit on so many times since Dobbs, even before Dobbs was decided. I saw this problem coming whereby people would think that with the reversal of Roe v. Wade, the abortion issue was going to be now only a state matter. But that's not the case at all. You mean,
No.
you read the not only the text of the Dobbs decision, but I always reference some of the key briefs that were sent to the court in this case. One of the most significant ones. More sitting members of Congress than ever signed on to a brief saying to the court, let us do our job. Let us legislate.
Right.
We want to legislate at the federal level. And then, of course, another very important brief in that case was from state legislators, hundreds of them, that signed on and basically said, let us do our job. Because under Roe, of course, they were doing their job, and the court would keep striking down these pro-life laws. Give us, from your perspective, a proper understanding. Dobbs returned the issue not just to the states, they returned it to the people and their elected representatives.
Correct. And that's why we see now, post-Dobbs, where you're going to have these ballot initiatives where people are going to be doing direct voting. You're going to have state legislators actually implementing legislation that is then enforced, and it's enacted, but it actually takes effect.
It gets upheld in the courts.
It's actually now law
Right.
and saving lives. We've got almost half of the country, half of the states in the country have some level of protection now for the unborn child. That was done through, whether it was a ballot initiative, through a state initiative, through state legislation, or from prior laws that Roe didn't allow to stay in effect. Some of those are now coming back into effect. So Dobbs opened up the door for we the people to once again have our voice heard about this issue, where we say we want to restore protection for the unborn child, we want our state government to help women choose life, and we want our federal government to afford protections for the unborn child as well. It really opened up the issue for us to have a deeper and greater impact and help build that culture of life.
I want to walk with you on a quick journey through some of the key legislation over the years that National Right to Life has advanced because, again, working side by side over the years with people like Doug Johnson.
Sure.
I remember
Right.
back in the years,
Right.
the partial birth abortion debate.
Absolutely.
Right? NRLC was
Sure.
leading that, right?
Sure.
So there was that partial birth abortion legislation. Then I remember after that was successfully passed, and you can remind us about that. Then I remember attending a strategy meeting with NRLC, and with the discussion was the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. So then there was that legislation. And tell us about those two kind of, I think of them as chapters in the battle for federal legislation, right?
Yeah,
those were two big chapters.
They really were. The strategy behind those, and what the strategy we've always held, is to try to create an affinity from the American people and elected officials with the unborn child, so that there is an understanding of the development of the child. So, you can look at the different development stages and see that we should protect the child when the heart is beating. We should protect the child when there are brain waves present. Protect the child once they can feel pain, that the baby can feel pain. Surely we should protect that child. Right. So there's been that push. There's also been the push to try to make sure that we are advancing legislation that furthers the cause to help women and inform women as well. So you have like the partial birth abortion, which opened up millions of people's minds to what is really going on. Yeah. This is another form of abortion. This is a method of abortion. So we've looked at those as well, such as trying to stop saline abortions, some of the most painful abortions with the saline injection, the partial birth abortion, of course. You've got the dismemberment abortion, trying to create that affinity with the American people to know that they can identify with that child as well, and want to protect that child from those excruciating pain, that membership or the dismemberment abortion. So there's a real push in going that route. But also, like even in the earliest days, the Hyde Amendment was a huge win, because the Hyde Amendment essentially came in and said, if abortion is going to be legal, at least the taxpayer shouldn't have to pay for it. Right. And the Hyde Amendment has saved millions of lives.
And the courts have always said, abortion is legal. That does not imply a duty of the state to fund it.
That's right.
The states are free. In fact, the Supreme Court, as you know, has reaffirmed many times, the states can even favor childbirth.
Yes,
in their funding and whatnot.
Correct.
You don't have to favor abortion.
Right. Yeah. Right. So there's a number of different prongs to doing that, but we're always moving in the direction of trying to make sure that the people are uniting with the unborn child, that they're wanting to support the woman, so that we can get a good outcome. You
think about it. Okay, partial birth abortion. And people think, what in the world is that? But then the words are simple to understand. The baby is literally partially born.
Right, correct.
And then is killed. Pain capable. So even the name of the legislation starts off with a word that everybody understands. Right. Everybody knows what pain is.
Right.
Don't make the legislation so abstruse. People say, "Oh, what does that mean?" And they, "Oh, I don't have time to think about it," and they go on to something else. But these are such. I've always agreed with and loved the strategy behind these NRLC bills that so many of which have successfully been passed.
Well, one of the most recent one that we've all been working on, of course, is Born Alive.
Born Alive.
These are babies that were being aborted but survived their abortion. We believe that they should then be able to receive medical care.
Remind our audience what just happened now in this new 119th Congress.
In that it was one of the first votes that they took.
Yeah.
Right on the week of January 22nd, the anniversary of Roe, the U.S. Congress, the House, as well as the Senate, took a vote on legislation that said basically if the baby survives their abortion, you have to provide them medical care. Just like any other baby that would be born, that individual child would receive care. Right. It passed the House. Of course, we didn't get to the cloture vote. You need to get to 60 in the Senate. So we couldn't get to 60. But again, it brought that awareness about the issue. Yeah. It brought it up. It made it up into the forefront of people's minds. And we'll go back again and keep on until we can get that legislation passed and enacted. The debate around that issue about does this really happen, does this not happen, it does happen, and it happens often. And this legislation afforded those who have survived their abortions another opportunity to tell their stories about how, yes, they were aborted, but they survived, they've thrived, they now can talk about it. Right. And it's really been an educational opportunity to educate members of Congress, but also the American people.
Well, for those of you that are just joining us, Scott Fischbach is joining us today. He's the Executive Director of National Right to Life, NRLC.org. NRLC.org. There's a legislative section you'll see there when you go to the website that'll help you to follow the kind of things we're talking about right now. You see the historic accomplishments in the past, you see the things that are before Congress right now, you see the things we want to push for in the months and years right ahead of us. So, Scott, in order to enact this good legislation, we need to elect good lawmakers.
Absolutely.
And the political angle, very, very much a part of National Right to Life, too. Tell us how that's structured into your organization and what you do for candidates?
Well, it's the law that gave us abortion on demand. So it's a law that we have to change, and the way that you change it is by electing the right people and put them in the right place. And so we have a strong political action committee that works directly with candidates, works with them on articulating their positions on the issue, works on educating them so that they can be more informed about the issue and what's coming up. We work up on Capitol Hill to make sure that those that are elected can articulate the pro-life message.
Oh, that's so important, right?
It's
if
huge.
a candidate doesn't know how to talk about it, that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a real problem, and our history, we've had plenty of candidates that didn't talk very well about it, and they don't do very well. They're not around anymore.
Right.
But so we try to work with them to articulate the message, but also then we're going to work with the grassroots to deliver those pro-life voters.
The voters.
The voters
yes.
are huge.
Yes.
And it's working at every level, working for your state legislators that are with us, working with those members of Congress, and then of course the big victory this last November was getting the presidency back,
yes.
which has had an immediate impact on saving lives.
It's been immediate.
It has been immediate. We couldn't get to January 20th fast enough. I mean, it was like we were waiting, and then it happened. So, and now, with those executive orders, lives are being saved immediately, which is huge.
Yeah.
So you can see that direct connect, that participating in the election, getting the right people in the right place, you can protect life.
The next big election, of course, there are some elections in 2025. In fact, at our meeting today that we're both participating in here, we were talking about the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Yes.
That's going to be an interesting battle at April. It's right around the corner, April 1st election. Later in the year, as you know, of course, Virginia as well as New Jersey will have important elections for state legislators and for their governors. But looking ahead to the midterms, it's not too early to be talking about the midterms. What do we have to achieve in 2026?
Well, we need to continue to build on our majorities.
Yeah.
The Senate, of course, is very important because we need to get to 60 so that we can actually make things happen.
Yes.
Two primary races there that could move us forward, of course, would be Georgia and Michigan. Those two are primary targets where it is currently represented by a pro-abortion member of the Senate, and we can actually win those two seats. So those two are very important.
Georgia and Michigan.
Georgia and Michigan are top of the list. Then in the U.S. House, our margin is so thin there. I mean, it's just razor thin. We need to elect more pro-lifers to the U.S. House. Typically in the midterm elections, the party that's in power loses some seats. And that's going to be problematic for us.
We can't let that happen this time. We're gonna buckle the trend of history this time.
we do. We've got to win. We've got to win in November 26th.
Yeah.
But I think we can.
I think so too.
I really do.
I think so too. Yeah.
So we've got to make a difference in those elections, make sure that we build on our majorities. We could also be looking at the possibility of a Supreme Court change, a member of the Supreme Court.
That could happen.
That could happen. Right now, if it happens within the next 2 years, we would be okay because we have the majority.
Because
of the Senate,
we know we have the Senate,
and we've got the
and there's no more filibuster for a Supreme Court.
Correct.
Explain that to the audience.
Yeah,
that was a recent change.
That was. All we need to do is get to 51. Really, well,
Praise
50 plus the vice president could actually get us a new member of the Supreme Court. But what we don't want to happen is to have one of our pro-lifers step down or retire. And then get into a fight about whether we could get somebody confirmed. We need to keep our numbers there in the Supreme Court.
Right.
We should be okay for the next 2 years, but who knows after those midterms.
Yes.
We need to keep the Senate to make sure the U.S. Supreme Court is going to be okay.
Yes. Well, of course, now your wife is one of the members of.
She is.
Tell us about
she
Michelle.
Is. Yeah, she's doing great. She's always been active. We met working for pro-life candidates and in the pro-life movement. She is in the U.S. House of Representatives. She represents the 7th Congressional District of Minnesota, which is the western half of our state. She is on the Ways and Means Committee as well as on the Rules Committee. She has offered just about all the pro-life legislation that comes before her. She's working now with Congressman Smith as a co-chair of the Pro-Life Caucus.
That's right.
In the
She's
House.
co-chair,
She's a
yes.
co-chair with him and a couple others.
Yeah.
And they're doing amazing work. They're doing
Yes.
great work. I'm so proud of her. She has broken so many glass ceilings. Back in Minnesota, she was the first female and first Republican president of the Minnesota Senate ever. And now in Congress, she's only the second woman to come from our district in Minnesota.
Is that so?
Yeah. So
I know, but
I'm very proud.
it's a joy to work with her, and I know that she's introduced some legislation on another topic I'd like to discuss briefly is the defunding of the
Absolutely.
abortion industry.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we often talk in terms of the defunding Planned Parenthood, but really we're talking about defunding the entire abortion industry because there's a lot of it aside from Planned Parenthood, and unfortunately Planned Parenthood, you know, they've positioned themselves in the minds of the American people in a very favorable way. They're very good at disguising who they are. They're a corrupt organization. They're a political machine. People think of them, oh, they're helping women's health. You know, no, they're a corrupt organization. But defunding, so she has introduced a bill in that regard. And do you think that, I mean, we discussed this in our meeting here today too, and many are of the opinion, I'd like to get your thought on it, that we may be closer to this goal of defunding Planned Parenthood than we've ever been.
I think we are.
You think so?
I think we are. And it's almost like there's a number of different things that are coming together at the same time that look like we could maybe be able to do it this year. And again, it's not just Planned Parenthood. We want the government out of the abortion mess. Just stay away from abortion entirely. Planned Parenthood, of course, is the group that gets the lion's share of the money. You know, they get hundreds of millions of dollars, whether it's through Title X or Medicaid. You know, they've done very well at taking all the money. So they're kind of the king of the money when it comes to abortion. But hopefully this year, either through reconciliation or through the budget process, or possibly through some of the actions of DOJ, if that's the route that it's going to take, we should be able to pull back some of the funding, if not all, of government funding of abortion and the abortion industry. So, you know, it's going to be a tough battle, you know, because those margins in the House are very tight.
Yes.
But our hope is that we can actually get it done this year.
So our viewers right now, if they call their representatives, if they call their 2 U.S. senators, they should be expressing now their desire, their conviction. Hey, I don't want my taxpayer dollars used for abortion.
Correct.
Right? They
Yes.
just make that call. Because again, there's a number of ways that Congress can act on this, whether
Absolutely.
it's bills like your wife has introduced, and Congressman Chris Smith also, or whether it's, I mean, they have to have a lot of different votes, don't they? I explain this often to our viewers that it's not just one spigot that you turn on or off when you
Correct.
talk about abortion
Right.
funding. It's like all these different streams. And the confusing thing about it is the different streams are controlled in different ways by different branches of government. So that's why President Trump was able to do certain things on day one that cut off a lot of funds. But other things require Congress, and other things require, I mean, there's all these separate votes, right? And these separate battles. And our friends in Congress are trying to simplify it by just saying, no taxpayer funding for abortion, period.
Right,
Across
just
the
stay
board,
out of
that
it.
would be
Right.
the best.
Yeah, it really would be.
Yeah.
You know, you've got the Hyde Amendment, you've got, there's just a whole bunch of different ways that we're trying to address all of these different streams of money that they get.
Yeah.
Of course, the president coming in saying no more money to USAID.
Right.
I mean, no more money internationally. You know, re-implementing the old Mexico City policy was huge.
Yes.
So International Planned Parenthood isn't getting our money that route. But again, like you said, there's so many streams that they are trying to get their hands on the money.
Yeah.
It does take a number of different efforts. But if I really do believe with this session of Congress, this is something we should be able to get done.
Now, we were talking before about the need for 60 votes in the Senate. That is always such a steep hill to climb. That's the main reason why so much good legislation doesn't get passed.
Right.
That's the main reason we got to have that as a goal in the midterms, 2026, get those 60 senators. But you mentioned the word reconciliation. Explain for our audience how that is a path where we don't have to worry about the 60 vote threshold.
Well, the good thing about reconciliation is we only need to get to majorities in both the House and in the Senate.
It's a special process.
It's a special process, and it essentially takes the budget with where it's at, You're going to make some of the changes on the spending end of things. You can increase or decrease through that process, but then it doesn't have to reach that 60 vote threshold in the Senate, so it can actually pass a reconciliation bill, can then go to the president and have it signed.
But it has to deal with dollars and cents.
It does. Yes,
that's
it
the
has
rule,
to deal
right?
with money.
It has to deal with money, right?
Right. So it is money focused, but again, that's where we really feel we can make that difference on the abortion funding.
And you mentioned Doge too. I mean, there was a beautiful editorial by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy back in some weeks ago, Wall Street Journal, and they actually mentioned the funding of Planned Parenthood as a potential area where it's like, why are we wasting our money on this? Let them raise their own money,
Yeah.
So this is interesting because maybe there's a lot of people out there who they're not on fire about the abortion issue like we are, but they are on fire for reducing the size and scope of government, reducing wasteful spending. Maybe they're more focused maybe on the tax issues than on the pro-life issue, which is fine. They can be our allies in this, right?
Absolutely.
If Doge is going to recommend, hey, get this money away from the abortion industry. That's a waste of hundreds of millions of dollars. I think we could rally those people to get behind that effort. Whether pro-life is their main thing or not doesn't really matter.
Right. Well, and our country has a huge debt right now. We have a deficit, and we need to make up that money. And I think, like with Elon Musk or some of the others talking about why does Planned Parenthood get all this money?
Yeah.
It introduces the issue to a whole new group of people that
that's
maybe
right.
we aren't reaching.
We're talking
yet.
about it all the time, but
yeah.
these folks, they never think about it.
And they're like, oh my gosh, why do we
Why
do
do
this?
we
Why
do
are we
this?
doing it?
That's right.
So it brings the issue to the fore for a whole new group of people.
Yeah.
And I think that is another one of the synergies that are coming together to say, now is the time. Let's get rid of this funding for Planned Parenthood. Exactly. They are a failing business. Like you said, they are corrupt. Yeah. They have the baby body parts.
Right.
They're closing centers. It's an old business model.
And it's a racist organization. They themselves
they're
have
roots.
admitted
Absolutely.
it now.
Margaret Sanger. I mean, it's their whole background. So I think this is the year that we can get it done. Wow. I hope we can.
I hope so.
I really do.
Yeah, and friends, we need all of you to do it. I mean,
Absolutely.
National Right to Life, we at Prolife, we're always giving you action items to do it. I want to conclude actually with having you tell them some of the other tools and resources that NRLC provides. But again, if you go to nrlc.org, you're going to see lots of things. The information, legislation, political, educational. Again, the three key issues: abortion, infanticide, and euthanasia. And I very much like the focus. I think a lot of groups fall into the trap of losing focus. I mean, there's 100 other good issues we agree on. We're passionate about these other issues too. But it's like when you set up an organization, you got to define that mission and then stick to it. Otherwise, your efforts get dissipated, right?
Absolutely.
And you can't, just because something else is a good issue, that doesn't mean, hey, our organization is going to expend resources on that issue. And I've always liked that discipline that National Right to Life has in that